It's time you quietly left this house, Mother. The wooden door slammed shut in front of me, the click of the lock dry and final, like it cut off my very breath. I, Dorothy-May, 68 years old, stood frozen on the porch, my hands trembling as I tried to make sense of what had just happened. Just a few years ago, Zoe, my daughter-in-law, still called me Mom, still held my hand when we went to the market, still asked me to watch the baby every night. And now, she looked at me like I was a stranger, a burden to be cast out of this house, the very house my husband once built with his bleeding hands. I knocked softly on the door. Zoe, did I do something wrong? Silence inside. Only my granddaughter's laughter floated out pure, bright, and heartbreakingly distant. I took a step back, peering through the fogged glass, and that was the moment my heart turned cold. Zoe was hiding a strange man behind that very door. Follow me, because what I discovered behind that door will chill you more than anything you've ever heard happen in a family. I was born in a small town in the American South, where the sun always burned golden over the old tiled roofs. At 22, I met Arthur, a man with gentle eyes and a voice like the ocean breeze. We got married just 3 months later. Arthur built this house with his own hands. Every brick, every beam of wood carried a piece of our youth. When our son, Ethan, was born, I once told him, "You're the reason I still believe this world can be beautiful." Ethan grew up kind and bright. After Arthur died in a construction accident, Ethan became my only comfort, the light that kept me moving forward. Then Ethan met Zoe, a beautiful black woman with fierce eyes and a smile that could melt anyone's heart. The first time he brought her home, I remember taking her hand and saying, "Welcome home, dear. From now on, you're my daughter too." And I meant it with all my heart. I believed I had gained another child. For the first few years, we were happy. The kitchen was always filled with laughter, the scent of apple pie, and the old songs Arthur used to love. Every morning, Zoe would make me coffee and say, "Mom, you make the best pancakes in town." And I would smile, because in her eyes, I saw the woman my son had fallen in love with. But everything began to change after Ethan's sudden death, a car accident on a gray, rainy afternoon. At the funeral, Zoe didn't cry. She just stood there, face cold as stone, eyes empty. I thought it was her way of holding herself together through the pain. But from that day on, something invisible grew between us, a cold distance, like a draft creeping through a cracked window in the middle of the night. I tried everything to mend it. I cooked dinner, took care of my little granddaughter, taught her to sing, to write her father's name. Zoe came home late, the scent of unfamiliar perfume clinging to her clothes. One evening, I heard her whispering on the phone in the kitchen. No, she doesn't suspect anything yet. I froze. I didn't know who she was talking about or what she meant. After that, Zoe stopped eating dinner with me. She'd leave her plate untouched on the table, and I'd quietly clean up in silence, like a shadow moving through the house. One night, I found my granddaughter, little Amelia, crying in her room. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" "Mom said you'll go away soon, to a place where old people live." I froze. Zoe had never said that to my face, but she had clearly planted the thought in the child's mind, that I was no longer needed. The next day, Zoe taped a note to the refrigerator. "House expenses will be handled by me from now on." I cried not because of money, but because of those words. They were cold, sharp, and final, like a knife through the heart. From that moment, I realized the daughter-in-law who once called me Mom was gone. The woman standing before me now was someone else quiet, calculating, with eyes that no longer reflected Ethan's love. Some nights, I still sat in Arthur's old chair, staring at the family photo on the shelf. Arthur, Ethan, Zoe, Amelia, all smiling, and me the keeper of those smiles, as the house slowly cracked under the weight of unspoken coldness. Then, that morning, Zoe stood by the door and said, "It's time you quietly left this house, Mother." I didn't know then that behind that door was the beginning of something far worse days, filled with secrets, deceit, and guilt, slowly peeling away, layer by layer. That morning, I stepped out onto the porch wearing my old wool cardigan, a cup of hot tea in hand. The pale sunlight brushed against the wooden steps, and the mailbox by the gate stood silent, just as it always did. But something was strange. It had been almost 2 weeks since I'd received any mail. No letters from the bank, no notes from old friends, not even the pension notice I usually got every month. I grabbed my cane and walked to the little post office at the end of the street. Linda, the blonde clerk, looked startled when she saw me. "Mrs. Dorothy? Wait, you haven't moved out yet?" "Moved out? Who told you that?" "We got a request to stop delivering mail to your address. Someone signed it on your behalf." "Who?" I asked, my voice cracking. "A woman named Zoe Carter. She's your daughter-in-law, right?" I froze. My whole body trembled as if someone had just crushed my heart in their hand. Zoe, what had she done? I walked home in a daze. The moment I opened the door, I saw Zoe sitting at the dining table, phone pressed to her ear, her voice calm as ever, but her eyes cold. When she saw me, she ended the call and asked curtly, "Where were you this early, Mother?" "Zoe, did you stop my mail deliveries?" "Yes." "You don't need all that paperwork anymore. I'm handling it for you." "But that's my pension, dear, the money I live on every month." "Well, you're living here, aren't you? I'll sort things out later." Her tone was casual, as if she were talking about replacing an old chair. That phrase, "I'll sort things out later," cut into me like a thin blade. I wanted to speak up, to fight back, but I couldn't. I just stood there, watching her walk past me, the sharp scent of her perfume lingering in the air. That afternoon, after Zoe left for work, I went into her room, my hands trembling as I opened the drawer. Inside was a stack of opened envelopes, bank statements. My eyes stopped at one line. Transfer, Mrs. Dorothy-May Pension Fund, Zoe Carter, temporary manager. The world spun. Zoe had transferred my entire pension into her own account. Every cent. I sank to the floor, clutching the edge of the table, my husband Arthur's voice echoing in my head. "Dorothy, you must hold on to what's yours. Don't let anyone take away what I left for you." That night, I lay awake in the dark, eyes wide open. The house was silent, only the clock ticked on. And I knew, in that moment, Zoe didn't just want me out of the house. She was taking my life, piece by piece. That afternoon, I was folding clothes in my room when I heard Zoe calling from downstairs, her voice sharp and commanding. "Mom, can you come down here for a minute?" I hurried down. She was standing in the middle of the living room, holding the walnut jewelry box, the one Ethan had given her on their wedding day. The lid was open. Inside, it was empty. "Have you seen my necklace?" Zoe asked. Her tone was calm, but her eyes were ice cold. "Which one?" "The one with the blue stone. I left it on my vanity this morning." I shook my head gently. "I haven't seen it, Zoe. Maybe you put it somewhere in." "No, you're the only one who's been home." Those words cut through me like a blade. I opened my mouth to speak, but my throat tightened. She didn't yell, didn't accuse, yet every word that fell from her lips carried a kind of cruel sweetness, like salt rubbed into a wound. That evening, there was a knock on the door. It was Mrs. Allen, our neighbor, bringing over a warm apple pie. Zoe opened the door with a bright smile. "Oh, hi, Mrs. Allen. My mother-in-law's been a bit forgetful lately, misplacing things all over the place. If you happen to see anything unusual around here, please let me know." I stood behind the door, hearing every word, feeling the blood in my veins turn cold. Me, Dorothy-May, who'd taught for over 40 years, now being hinted at as a thief in my own home. When Mrs. Allen left, I stepped out. "Zoe, why would you say that in front of other people?" "I was just telling the truth. You've been leaving things everywhere. You even forgot to cook dinner last night. You should probably see a doctor, Mom. I'm worried something's starting to go wrong." "I'm fine," I said quietly, trying to steady my voice. "Then prove it," she replied, turning to walk upstairs, leaving me standing alone in the dim living room. After that, notes began appearing all over the house. "Don't touch the stove. Do not use the fireplace without supervision. No opening the fridge after 8 p.m. I read each one, my hands trembling. Every note was like a sentence declaring that I was no longer capable of living like a normal person. Then things got worse. One morning, Zoe took me to a clinic. "It's just a health check, Mom." But the doctor asked strange questions. "Do you remember what day it is today? Who is the current president? Do you often forget where you put things?" Zoe sat beside me, nodding, adding softly, "She sometimes forgets where she leaves her keys. Once she left the stove on, too." I turned to her, eyes burning. "Zoe, why would you say that? I'm just trying to help you." That's when I understood. She was building a case, a temporary mental decline diagnosis, to legally take control of everything. That night, I sat in the dark, listening to the clock tick like it was counting down. In the hallway, Zoe's shadow stretched across the floor, long and still, like a ghost waiting to strike. She stopped right outside my door and whispered, "I won't let anyone ruin this plan, Mom." The door closed. I gripped the small ring of keys in my hand, the ones to the room where I kept Arthur's old documents. If she wanted to steal my life, I wasn't going to let her. That afternoon, a light rain began to fall. The scent of damp earth drifted through the open window. Zoe came home earlier than usual, something that hadn't happened in months. She carried a folder under her arm and wore an unusually bright smile. "Mom, let me make you some tea. I just have a few insurance forms that need your signature, nothing serious." I nodded quietly, not wanting to spark another argument. She set a cup of tea in front of me, steam rising, the unfamiliar scent of mint hanging in the air. On the table lay 3 thick sheets of paper covered in fine print. At the top, I saw the words, "Authorization, Temporary Property Management." "I thought you said this was for insurance, Zoe?" I asked. "It is, Mom. Everything's so bureaucratic these days. Just sign here, and our house will qualify for asset protection. I'm only doing this for you." "Why are there 3 pages? One for the insurance company, one for the bank, and one for the management office. Just formalities, Mom." Her voice was sweet as honey, but her eyes didn't smile. I looked into them. Those eyes that used to be warm, now cold as frozen glass. I hesitated. The pen trembled in my hand, my palms slick with sweat. Zoe tilted her head slightly, her smile tightening. "Don't you trust me, Mom?" "It's not that. You're tired. I'm trying to help. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I said nothing, and then, almost hypnotized by that soft, syrupy voice, I signed. My signature wavered, the ink dragging across the page like a crack spreading through glass. 3 signatures, 3 soft rustles of paper. And that was it. Zoe gathered the documents, her smile turning complete, almost triumphant. I knew you'd understand. Get some rest, Mom. It's going to rain harder soon. She turned away. The door closed behind her. I sat still, that uneasy feeling crawling up my spine. A few days later, I began noticing strangers around the house. One man carried a rolled-up blueprint. "I'm here to remeasure the property lines," he said. "Mrs. Zoe hired me to prepare the new deed transfer." I froze. "Transfer? What transfer?" "This house, ma'am. It's already been filed according to the new documents." I watched him leave, the rain pelting my face, though I didn't feel its cold. I went straight to my room, opened a drawer, and pulled out my old phone. It was a relic from the days when Arthur was still alive. I used to record lessons for my students on it. I switched on the voice recorder and tucked it into my pocket. If Zoe lied to me again, I'd have proof. That night, she came into my room, her tone syrupy sweet, her smile rehearsed. "Mom, from now on, just let me handle everything. The house, the bank, the bills. You don't need to worry. But Zoe, this house belongs to Arthur and me, don't you? Arthur's gone, and Ethan's gone too. I'm the only one who can take care of you now, understand?" She placed a hand on my shoulder, not a gentle touch, but one of quiet control. Then she smiled and walked away. I sat still, heart pounding out of rhythm. The house that had once been my home now felt like a prison. I could hear the rain drumming on the roof, each drop sounding like the countdown to something about to shatter. Before bed, I opened my desk drawer and took out Arthur's old notebook. Between the yellowed pages, I found a line he'd written in ink long ago. "If you ever doubt someone in your own home, don't trust their words. Trust their actions." I smiled faintly through tears. Arthur was still guiding me even from beyond the grave. And I knew then tonight I wouldn't sleep. I would watch, and I would wait. For the moment the truth revealed itself. That night, the house was swallowed by a cold silence, the kind that feels alive, as if it too was guarding a secret. The pendulum clock in the living room ticked, talked, ticked, talked. I sat on the bed, unable to close my eyes. Outside, the wind scraped against the windows, and the rain whispered against the glass like soft warnings I didn't yet understand. Sometime near midnight, I heard the faint creak of the front door opening. A dim yellow light flickered beneath the stairs. Zoe's footsteps followed soft, slow, cautious, as if she didn't want anyone to know what she was doing. I reached for my phone, the old one, already recording, and crept quietly down the hallway. Through the narrow gap between the stairs, I could see her. Zoe stood in the middle of the living room, dressed in a silk robe, hair loose around her shoulders, phone in hand. Her voice was low, but clear, every word sharp as a needle piercing the air. "I told you, she's old and confused. Once the papers are finalized, the house will be in my name." A man's rough, gravelly voice answered. "And what about the old woman? You can't just throw her out." Zoe let out a quiet laugh, a sound colder than the rain outside. "Don't worry. I'll tell the doctor she's unfit to live alone. They'll move her to a care home. She won't even know what happened." I gripped the phone tighter, my heart pounding so loud I thought they might hear it. Every word she said stabbed deeper, until it hurt to breathe. She didn't just want my home, she wanted to erase me entirely and make it legal. The man stepped closer. The light caught his dark glasses. "Once it's sold, we split the profit, right?" "Of course," Zoe replied, her tone silky smooth. 50-50. I just need a few more days. She still thinks I'm helping her." My knees nearly gave out. Heat rushed to my face, while my hands turned ice cold. I clung to the railing just to stay upright. When they walked toward the door, I saw Zoe tilt her head and smile, her hand laced with the man's, her eyes gleaming in the dark, like those of someone who just won a cruel game. The door shut behind them. Only the pounding rain remained. I sank to the floor, my chest tight. In the darkness, I looked down at my phone. The screen glowed faintly. Recording saved. 02:41 a.m. It was my first piece of evidence, small but enough to spark light in the depths of the pit she'd thrown me into. I looked around the house, the family photos, the door frames Arthur once painted, the chair where Ethan used to sit. My voice trembled as I whispered, "Arthur, Ethan, do you see this? Our daughter-in-law sold her soul for money." A bolt of lightning split the sky, flashing through the window, and in the reflection on the glass, I saw my own face, older, yes, but with eyes no longer afraid. I stood up, wiped my tears, and clutched the phone tight. "Zoe wants to turn me into a ghost in my own home?" I whispered. "No, tomorrow, I'll be the ghost that haunts her." I turned to the window, watching the rain pour down on the roof. And deep inside, I knew the battle had just begun. That morning, the sky was heavy and gray. The wind slammed against the windows as if warning me that something terrible was coming. It was Arthur's Memorial Day, my husband, the man I'd shared half my life with. Every year, I cooked his favorite meal myself, beef stew with red wine and garlic bread. But this year, Zoe took over everything. "Mom, just rest. Cooking's too much work, I'll handle it." "But that's our family tradition." I said, "I'll handle it." Her tone left no room for argument, so I stayed quiet, watching her move around my kitchen like the rightful owner of this house. Guests began arriving, Arthur's relatives, a few close neighbors, everyone dressed in dark colors, holding flowers, faces solemn. And Zoe, the picture-perfect daughter-in-law, greeted each one with a gentle smile, playing her role flawlessly. "Hello, Auntie. It's been so long. Mom's been a little weak lately, so I took care of everything for her." I felt a lump rise in my throat. They looked at me with pity, the same pity Zoe had carefully planted in their minds, the pity reserved for someone old and confused. The ceremony began. Everyone gathered around the altar, incense smoke curling into the air. Zoe stepped forward, hands pressed together, her voice low and falsely tender. "Please, Arthur, bless Mom with good health. Keep me and Amelia safe and happy." I stood behind her, clutching my phone inside my pocket, the same phone that held the recording from the night before, the proof that Zoe had plotted with a strange man to steal my home. At lunch after the service, the air was thick and heavy. Zoe sat at the head of the table, chatting and laughing, sharing heartwarming family memories. I sat at the far end, a shadow among them. Every word out of her mouth. Mom loved Ethan so much. This house holds so many memories, twisted like a knife in my stomach. Arthur's cousin leaned toward me and whispered softly, "Dorothy, you look so thin. Are you doing all right?" I forced a smile. "I'm fine. Everything's fine." But my eyes never left Zoe. She met my gaze, and for just a flicker of a second, her smile faltered. She was afraid. I could see it. As the meal came to an end, I stood up. My voice trembled with emotion, but carried through the whole room. "Arthur, if you were still here, would you believe that the woman who once called me Mom now wants to drive me out of the very house you built?" Silence fell like a stone. A spoon clattered against a plate. Zoe's face drained of color. "What are you talking about, Mom?" she said sharply, forcing a smile. "You all heard that, didn't you?" I said, my eyes fixed on her. This is a recording from last night. I think everyone deserves to hear it. I pulled out my phone and pressed play. Zoe's voice filled the room, clear, cold, undeniable. Once it's sold, we split the profit 50-50. No one moved. Arthur's cousin covered her mouth in shock. The youngest nephew blurted out, "Zoe, what the hell is that?" Zoe slammed her hand on the table. "That's fake. She edited it. She's trying to destroy me." "I don't care about your reputation," I said calmly, my voice steady and firm. "I only care about justice for Arthur and for this house." The room erupted the moment the recording ended. Chairs scraped, voices murmured, eyes turned, all of them fixed on Zoe. "Zoe, explain this," said Mark, Arthur's younger brother, his tone sharp. "It's not real. She edited it. She's trying to ruin me," Zoe shouted, pointing straight at me. Her face flushed red, eyes flashing with fury as she stormed closer. "Why are you doing this, huh? Trying to turn everyone against me? You can't stand that I manage this house better than you ever did, is that it?" I looked at her calm, steady, unflinching. "I only know one thing: my son is gone, but this house still belongs to him. Not to the woman who sold it behind my back." Zoe gave a bitter laugh, her voice dripping with venom. "Oh, that's rich. You all want to know the truth? She's sick. She's been losing her mind for months, paranoid, delusional. I've had to take her to a doctor more than once. The doctor confirmed it." A ripple of gasps spread through the table. Some of the relatives glanced at me with uncertainty. "Is that true, Dorothy?" someone whispered. "Do you have proof, Zoe?" Mark cut in sharply. Zoe dove into her purse, pulling out a stack of papers. "Here, medical report from a licensed psychiatrist. See? It's signed." I stepped forward and snatched it from her hand. The page read clearly. Patient, Dorothy-May Carter. Observation, early stage dementia. My hands trembled, but I lifted my head and met her gaze. "So, this is how far you've gone, Zoe?" "I'm doing what's best for you." "No, you're just trying to make your lies look legal." The air in the room thickened, ready to explode. Little Amelia stood behind the door, wide-eyed, her small voice trembling. "Mom, why are you shouting at Grandma?" That single question struck Zoe like a blade. She spun around, snapping, "Go to your room!" The child burst into tears. Silence fell like a curtain, and slowly, the pity in everyone's eyes shifted into anger. "Zoe, even if Dorothy were sick, you can't treat her like that," Mark barked. "I don't need anyone telling me how to care for my mother-in-law," Zoe screamed back, her breath shaking. "None of you know what I've been through. I raise my child alone. I run this house. I pay the bills, and she just sits there, looking at me like I'm a thief." She buried her face in her hands, sobbing the perfect picture of a wronged daughter-in-law. But I didn't move. I simply unlocked my phone and played the second clip. A man's voice. "And what about the old woman?" Then Zoe's, cold and deliberate. "Don't worry. I'll tell the doctor she's unfit to live alone. They'll take her away." The room froze. Zoe went pale, the tears on her cheeks drying into salt. I spoke slowly, each word heavy as stone. "No one forced you to care for me, Zoe. But if you chose deceit, at least have the courage to admit it." Her lips quivered. Then suddenly, she grabbed her bag and bolted for the door. It slammed shut behind her hard. The house fell into utter silence. I sat down, clutching the phone tightly. No one spoke. Only Amelia's soft sobs and the faint crackle of incense on the altar broke the stillness. I knew the battle wasn't over. Zoe would come back, and next time she wouldn't just use words. "Duoi jai la bandich," sang tieng an chuan, mai qua joan, ban vua gui. That night, the rain came down in sheets, as if the sky were pouring out its fury. The house was silent, lit only by the dim yellow lamp in the living room. I sat in the armchair, still wearing the black dress from the memorial, a cup of cold tea in my hand. Suddenly, the front door flew open. Zoe stood there, hair disheveled, eyes swollen and red, her clothes soaked through. "Why are you back?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "To talk," she replied, closing the door, her gaze sharp as a blade. She stepped closer, the scent of rain mixed with her overpowering perfume, making the air hard to breathe. "Happy now?" she said quietly. "You humiliated me in front of the family. I've lost everything because of your stupid recordings." I stayed seated. "Zoe, you lost it yourself. No one forced you to say those things. I lost it because I'm tired. I live in this house, and I've never been treated like family. You always look at me with contempt, like I stole your son." I raised my head slowly and said, "Zoe, you didn't steal Ethan. You only stole what he left behind." She scoffed, her tears mixing with a choked laugh. "Ethan! Ethan! You always talk about Ethan. He's dead. I'm the one who's alive. I have to raise my child, carry the burden, survive." "What do you know?" She leaned so close I could feel her hot breath. "If you don't hand this house over to me, I'll make sure you really end up in a care home. I've got doctors, papers, witnesses. Next time, no one will believe you." I set my cup down, my hands trembling slightly but my gaze steady. "You know, Zoe, Ethan trusted you, which is why he left things to you. But he forgot one thing: greed can turn love into a wound." Zoe narrowed her eyes as if she wanted to tear every word apart. "Who's going to believe an old confused woman over a young grieving widow who knows how to cry and play the victim?" I smiled, calm and strange. I opened the small drawer beside the chair, took out a small silver USB and placed it on the table. "If you really think no one will believe me, tomorrow we'll let the lawyer listen to this." Zoe froze. "What are you saying?" "My phone only had a backup. The original files are on this USB. And there are more recordings, calls, emails, messages you sent to that man." Zoe went pale. She stepped back, eyes darting around the room. Then she suddenly burst into tears and collapsed in front of me. "Mom, please, don't do this. I'll lose everything." I looked at her, pain stabbing my chest. Despite my anger and hatred, I could still see the woman who once sat at my table and called me Mom in a sweet voice. "You already had everything, Zoe," I said softly. "You just chose to lose it." She lifted her head. The pleading in her eyes had turned to icy resolve. "You'll regret standing against me," she said. She sprang up, yanked the door open, and vanished into the night rain. The door slammed shut, leaving me alone in the dark, the clock ticking like the frantic heartbeat of fate. I knew then the next battle would no longer be only within the family. Zoe would strike back legally, and I, an old woman, would have to learn to fight back with the truth. 2 days after that confrontation, I found a gray envelope lying on the front porch. On it were the words, "Notice of eviction. You are required to vacate the premises within 14 days. At the bottom was a signature. Zoe Carter, my daughter-in-law. I stood frozen on the porch. The house Arthur built, the one where Ethan grew up, where I used to plant tomatoes behind the garden, had now become a piece of property I was being forced to leave. I sat down on the wooden chair, my hands trembling as I reached for my phone. The only person I could think to call was Michael Turner, a young lawyer an old friend had recommended. "Mrs. Dorothy, this is Michael," he said, his voice steady and calm. I heard you needed help. I think my daughter-in-law has stolen my house, I whispered. But I don't even know where to start. I signed papers, but I don't know what they were anymore. That's all right, ma'am. Just tell me everything from the beginning. We met at a small cafe on the corner. I brought a worn canvas bag filled with old documents, copies of authorization forms, bank statements, and the silver USB drive I'd been keeping hidden. Michael opened his laptop, scanned through the papers, then frowned. You signed this one? Yes. She said it was for insurance. No, Mrs. Dorothy, he said carefully. This is a transfer of ownership form. My head spun. The noise of the cafe faded into a blur. Michael looked up, his tone firm but gentle. But don't worry, the process she used is invalid. There are clear procedural errors. You can get your property back. Do you have any original evidence? I placed the USB on the table. This has the recordings and a few emails I found on Ethan's old computer. They might help. He plugged it in, played the recording. Zoe's voice filled the quiet cafe, cold and unmistakable. I'll tell the doctor she's unfit to live alone. Once it's sold, we split the profit. Michael's eyes lit up. Mrs. Dorothy, this is solid evidence. We can sue her for elder abuse and fraudulent property transfer. I held my coffee cup tightly, the warmth seeping into my trembling fingers. I just want Arthur's house back, I said softly. That's all. I understand, he replied. But sometimes, to get justice, we have to go a little further. He closed his laptop and said firmly, From now on, you're not alone anymore. It was the first time in months that I felt truly heard. That evening, when I returned home, Zoe still hadn't come back. I sat by the table, staring at the quiet room, and whispered to Arthur's photo. Arthur, someone's going to help me take back what's ours. Outside, the rain began to fall again. But this time, I wasn't afraid. I knew the coming legal storm would be fierce, and I, Dorothy-May, would stand at its center with the truth as my weapon. Duoi jai la bandich sang tieng an, chuan mi, qua joan van ban vuagui. 3 weeks after that confrontation, I received a summons. Not only was Zoe being sued, she had filed a countersuit against me. Her claim? Mrs. Dorothy-May Carter suffers from cognitive decline and lacks legal capacity. All accusations are delusions. I held the paper in my hands as if it were burning. Did she really dare to do this? I asked Michael as he read the file. He only nodded slightly. Zoe Carter is clever, Mrs. Dorothy. She chose to attack the single weakest point, your lucidity. But we can fight back. The preliminary hearing took place at the small-town courthouse. I walked into the room leaning on my cane, head slightly bowed. Across from me, Zoe appeared in a cream business dress, immaculate, gentle, fragile, like an angel wrongly accused. Her attorney stood and spoke crisply. Your Honor, my client, Mrs. Zoe Carter, is simply protecting legally authorized property transferred by her mother-in-law. We have medical certification showing Mrs. Dorothy suffers from severe cognitive impairment. Zoe kept her head bowed, dabbing her eyes with a white handkerchief now and then. The courtroom murmured. I watched her and saw every gesture was calculated, staged like a performance. Michael rose, calm but cutting. Your Honor, we do not deny Mrs. Dorothy's age, but we have evidence showing that the authorization was signed under fraudulent circumstances. He placed the silver USB on the bench. On it is a recording of Mrs. Zoe Carter speaking with a man about selling the house, recorded before the documents were signed. The courtroom fell quiet. Zoe turned pale and clutched her skirt. Her counsel objected immediately. That recording could be doctored. We submitted the audio for forensic analysis, Michael answered. The result confirmed the voices 100%. Both were identified Mrs. Zoe Carter and a man named Frank Weller. That name dropped like a stone into a still pond. Zoe stiffened, lips trembling. Frank, he's just a business associate. A business associate? Michael raised an eyebrow. Strange, since that man was arrested for financial fraud 2 years ago. Bank records show a $10,000 transfer from Mrs. Zoe's account to him one day after the house was retitled. The courtroom gasped. Zoe bowed her head, face drained of color, hands shaking. I looked at her with a mix of bitterness and pity. The judge struck the gavel. We will adjourn to review the newly submitted evidence. Meanwhile, Mrs. Dorothy's property rights shall be preserved. Tears welled in my eyes. For the first time in months, justice tilted, if only a little, in my favor. When we left the courthouse, Zoe would not meet my eyes, but I heard her whisper behind me, small and cutting. You think you've won? This game is far from over, Mom. Michael turned to me and gave a slight nod. Don't be afraid. She's trying to intimidate. Now it's our turn to strike. I gripped his hand hard, feeling a new emotion well up, not fear, but resolve. This time, I would not back down. Doi jai laban dich sang tieng an chuan. Mai kua joan vun ban vua gui. 3 weeks after the hearing, Zoe had almost vanished. No calls, no messages, only a few vague posts on social media. Everyone has to look out for themselves. The truth always has 2 sides. Michael saw them and gave a thin smile. She's trying to manipulate public opinion. But this time, we're 1 step ahead. That morning, we went to the central bank. Michael presented the paperwork in a clear voice. Per the court's temporary order, please freeze all accounts under the name Zoe Carter until the case is resolved. The bank clerk checked and nodded. Confirmed. The account is frozen. There are 3 suspicious transactions in the past 30 days, totaling over $65,000. Michael turned to me, his eyes bright. That's money from the house. I gripped my hands. So many sleepless nights, so many tears now condensed into a cold number. $65,000, the price of my family in Zoe's eyes. That afternoon, we stopped by the law office. Michael opened his laptop and briefed his team of assistants. We'll request an investigation into the origin of those transfers. If we can prove Zoe intentionally moved funds abroad, that would be money laundering. Then, this case moves from civil to criminal. I shuddered to hear it. Michael, I only want the house back. I don't want anyone to go to jail. He looked up, calm. You're not sending anyone to prison. They walked themselves into this. That evening, back at home, I received a strange email. Sender, Zoe Carter. Just a few lines. Mom, please, let's talk. I didn't mean to hurt you. Meet me tomorrow at the cafe we used to go to with Ethan. I stared at the screen, my feelings tangled. Was this a sincere apology or a trap? Michael glanced over and said immediately, Don't go alone. She never does anything without an agenda. The next morning, Michael accompanied me to the old cafe. Zoe was already there in the corner, haggard, her eyes ringed with dark circles. When she saw me, she burst into tears. Mom, I'm sorry. I lost everything. The accounts are frozen. The lawyer quit. I didn't think it would go this far. I sat down and watched her silently. Zoe, you haven't lost anything. You're only bearing what you created. Please, just drop the case. I'll leave. I'll never come back. Just let me keep some money for Amelia. Those last words made my heart sink. Amelia, an innocent child who'd done nothing wrong. I looked at Michael. He shook his head slightly and said quietly, If we concede, you lose everything. I sighed and turned back to Zoe. You can keep one thing, Zoe. a chance to make amends, but justice cannot be bought. Zoe fell silent, tears dropping onto the table. She bowed her head and whispered, "If you keep going, I'll tell the world a different story." "You can lie one more time," I replied, my voice low but steady, "but this time the truth will speak." She stood up and left. The cafe door opened and a cold wind blew in. Michael watched her go and said softly, "She'll play the media card. Get ready, Dorothy. The next battle won't be fought in court anymore." I nodded, clutched my handbag, the little silver USB still inside. I was ready. 3 days after that meeting at the cafe, as I was making my morning tea, my phone began to vibrate nonstop. The screen flooded with messages. "How can you be such a cruel mother-in-law? Give the house back to the young widow, you monster! If Ethan were alive, he'd be ashamed of you!" My hands shook so badly, I dropped the cup. Hot tea splashed across the floor. I opened my browser, and my heart seemed to stop. On the Facebook page Life Stories US, a post was going viral with more than 10,000 shares. The headline read, "Young widow driven out by her mother-in-law, robbed of her only home." Below it was a photo of Zoe holding her little daughter, her eyes red and tearful. The caption said, "Zoe Carter, 34, a widowed mother, is being stripped of her only home by her 68-year-old mother-in-law, the house where she once lived with her late husband." Underneath were hundreds of furious comments. "What a wicked old woman. Poor Zoe. The law should punish people who use their age to steal from the young." My hands trembled as I scrolled. The whole world seemed to turn its back on me. To them, Dorothy-May was no longer a grieving mother, but the villain of my own story. Moments later, Michael called. "Don't read any more of it," he said sharply. "They're running a media campaign. I checked that post is boosted by paid ads. It's part of a smear operation." "But they're lying, Michael. They've twisted everything." "I know, but the public doesn't care about facts, they care about feelings. So now, we have to tell a story that feels true." That afternoon, Michael took me to a small newsroom. He introduced me to Clara, a journalist he knew, sharp eyes, calm demeanor. "I've read the files," she said. "If your evidence checks out, your story could make people rethink how they treat the elderly." "I don't need anyone's pity," I said softly, my voice cracking. "I just want my name and my husband's house cleared of lies." Clara nodded. "Then you'll have your chance. I'll write it, but this time, we'll tell the truth in a way people can't look away from." That night, Clara's article went live. Its title, "When a Mother-in-Law Becomes the Villain, the Truth Behind a Town's Most Talked About Dispute." It laid out the evidence, the recordings, the bank transfers, and a single quote from me. "I don't want revenge. I just want my husband's home to be free of lies." The story spread fast, almost as fast as Zoe's, and the comments began to shift. If what she says is true, then Zoe's been playing everyone. People always believe the one who cries louder, not the one who endures quietly. But only a few hours later, Zoe posted a tearful video of her own. "I don't want to speak anymore. But I've never done anything wrong. My mother-in-law is being manipulated by people who want to hurt me." The video hit over 200,000 views overnight, and I understood then the battle for public opinion had ignited into a full-scale war. A week after Zoe's tearful video flooded the internet, Clara called me, her voice urgent. "Mrs. Dorothy, the national television network just invited you and Zoe for a live interview. They want both sides. This could be your chance, but it could also be a trap. Are you sure you want to go on air?" I was silent for a few seconds. Then I answered, slow but firm. "If I don't speak, they'll only hear one voice. I'm ready." The studio lights blazed, cameras pointed straight at me. Behind the glass wall, dozens of people filled the audience seats. Zoe sat opposite me, perfectly made up. Hair neatly pinned, her eyes slightly red as if she'd been crying all night. The host, a composed woman named Mara, began in a calm but cutting tone. Today, we bring together two women who have divided public opinion. On one side, the mother-in-law, Mrs. Dorothy-May, 68. On the other, the young widow, Mrs. Zoe Carter. They're fighting over the same house. But the real question is, who is telling the truth? The light above me was harsh. I could feel my heart pounding like a drum. Zoe spoke first, her voice trembling but clear. I never wanted a fight. I just wanted a home for my daughter. After my husband died, my mother-in-law changed. She started forgetting things, lashing out for no reason. I only did what I had to do to protect my family. The audience murmured. A few nodded sympathetically. Mara turned to me. Mrs. Dorothy, what do you say to that? I looked straight into the camera, my voice low, steady, but unwavering. I might forget my own birthday someday, but I will never forget the look in my son's eyes when he said, "Keep this house, Mom. It's Dad's memory." She says I'm confused, but confusion can't record someone else's voice. From my pocket, I pulled out the small silver USB and held it up. This is the truth. Her voice. Her words. I don't need anyone to believe me, I just ask. What kind of mother invents lies about the person she once called her daughter? The studio fell silent. The camera turned to Zoe. She gave a strained smile, tears streaking down her face. I didn't know she was recording. I was scared of losing everything. Mara leaned forward gently. Zoe, do you admit that the voice in the recording is yours? Zoe didn't answer. Her head dropped, fingers clutching at her dress. From the audience, Clara, the investigative journalist, stood up and said loudly, "If necessary, I have the official forensic report confirming her voice." The room buzzed with whispers. Some audience members turned to Zoe, doubt flickering in their eyes. I looked at her and said softly, with sorrow more than anger, "Zoe, I've already forgiven you in my heart. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. What will you teach your daughter if you choose deceit over truth?" Zoe broke down, sobbing, her words muffled by tears. "I just wanted a family. And you destroyed it with your own hands," I replied quietly. The host gave a solemn nod and ended the segment with a line that silenced the entire studio. Perhaps, in the war between truth and emotion, what hurts most isn't losing a house, but losing the one who once called you Mom. The lights dimmed. The studio went still. And I sat there, in the hush that followed, feeling utterly drained, but finally, free. 3 days after the live interview, it seemed like the storm was finally settling. Clara's article was at the top of every search feed, and most of the public had begun to take my side. For the first time in months, I almost allowed myself to breathe until Tuesday morning. Michael called, his voice tight as wire. "Mrs. Dorothy, don't turn on the TV. Don't check the internet. Something's happened." "What is it?" "Zoe just released a new video. She's accusing us of fabricating everything for money." I didn't listen. I opened my browser, and what appeared on the screen was a nightmare. The video opened with a slow, mournful melody, images of me spliced together from interviews, mixed with clips of Michael standing beside me. Zoe's voice came through, trembling, tearful, but perfectly calculated. "I can't stay silent anymore. They, Mrs. Dorothy and her lawyer, created this tragic story to collect donations from the public. They wrote a script, hired people to edit fake recordings. I'm the real victim. Alongside her narration were doctored images, fake payment receipts, fabricated emails, even altered audio clips that made it sound as though I had been lying all along. The comments flooded in. So disappointing. She fooled everyone. Now we know who the real liar is. I sat frozen. All the effort, all the sleepless nights, all the tears that had finally begun to bring justice twisted again into something dirty. That evening, Michael's office was surrounded by reporters. Headlines spread across tabloid sites. Young lawyer accused of staging a viral drama with elderly client. He arrived at my house late that night, shirt wrinkled, eyes bloodshot from exhaustion. "Mrs. Dorothy, they're not just attacking you now, they're coming after me too." "Michael, I'm so sorry." "Don't be. None of this is your fault. And I'm not letting her win." He opened his laptop and pulled up a file. "She says we faked it, but I had a data forensics expert trace the origin of her video." The entire clip was edited using software on her own computer, timestamps match exactly. My heart thudded as he continued. "And here's more. While she was uploading that video, she tried logging into her frozen bank account to transfer money overseas. Every action was recorded." He smiled faintly dry, but certain. "She just committed 2 more crimes: digital fraud and violation of a court asset freeze." I exhaled slowly. All the weight of the past months seemed to lift in a single moment. "Are you sure?" "Positive. And tomorrow morning we'll hand everything to the court and to Clara." The next day, Clara's headline hit every major news feed. The flip side of the story. Forensic proof shows Zoe's video was fake. The article laid out every technical detail, timestamp logs, metadata trails, and expert confirmations. Social media erupted again, but this time the tide had turned. Zoe really thought she could outsmart everyone. Poor Mrs. Dorothy, even the elderly have to fight lies these days. Zoe disappeared from the internet. No more videos, no comments, just silence. That evening, I sat on the porch, listening to the soft hum of crickets. Michael came out and placed a court document on the table beside me. "Official trial date 2 weeks from now." I looked up at the dark sky and whispered, "Arthur, Ethan, it's almost over." The moonlight touched my face, and for the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't known in so long: peace. That morning, the sky over the town was washed in a pale gray. The courthouse gates were swarming with people and reporters. Camera flashes burst like sparks, and questions came flying like blades. "Mrs. Dorothy, are you afraid of losing the case? Zoe Carter says you still refuse to admit your wrongdoing. What do you say to that?" I walked slowly, my hand resting on Michael's arm. The wind lifted the hem of my black dress. I didn't answer any of them, because today, I didn't need to speak. The truth would do it for me. Courtroom 3 was cold, high-ceilinged and solemn. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows, glinting on the polished wood of the tables. To the right sat Michael and me. Across the aisle, Zoe sat hunched, her hair loose and covering half her face. She wore a black dress, no makeup, yet there was a hardness in her posture, as though she still believed she could turn everything around. The judge, Mrs. Jenkins, a stern woman with eyes that saw straight through, struck her gavel 3 times. "The court is now in session. The case of Dorothy-May Carter versus Zoe Carter begins." Zoe's attorney rose first. "Your Honor, my client never intended to seize any property. Every transaction was signed voluntarily, with Mrs. Dorothy in sound mind. Furthermore, my client believes Mrs. Dorothy suffers from memory decline and may have been manipulated." Zoe lowered her head, sighing softly, performing exhaustion. A low murmur swept through the gallery. I sat still, hands clasped, expression calm. Then Michael stood. His voice was low, steady, but each word landed like a hammer blow. Your Honor, we bring more than words. We bring proof. He stepped forward and plugged the small silver USB into the court's projector. The wall lit up the original video, taken from a hidden camera I hadn't realized I'd triggered the night I dropped my phone. Zoe's voice echoed across the silent courtroom, crystal clear and undeniable. Once it's sold, we split the profit 50-50. I'll tell the doctor she's unfit to live alone. The room went dead quiet. Zoe's head snapped up, her face ghostly pale. That's not me. Someone edited. Michael cut her off, his tone sharp as steel. We had the file analyzed by forensic experts. The voice matches 100%. The file shows no edits, and the timestamp matches the data from your own phone. The judge turned to her, voice cold and direct. Mrs. Zoe Carter, do you wish to deny this evidence? Zoe said nothing. A bead of sweat slid down her temple. Her face looked frozen between fear and emptiness. Michael continued. We also have bank records showing that on the same day this recording was made, a $10,000 transfer was sent to a man named Frank Weller, previously convicted of financial fraud. The two exchanged multiple emails. He looked directly at her. Would you like the court to believe that's just a coincidence? Zoe began to shake. I only did what he told me. I didn't mean. But you did, Michael said, firm and clear. You didn't just deceive a mother, you deceived justice itself. The courtroom stayed utterly still. Zoe broke down crying, her sobs echoing faintly in the heavy silence. Judge Jenkins struck the gavel once more, her voice ringing through the hall. The court will recess for 30 minutes before sentencing. The defendant, Zoe Carter, is to remain in temporary custody. I sat motionless, watching as the officers led her away. For the first time in many months, I felt no anger, only a sorrow deep as the sea. Michael placed a hand on my shoulder and said quietly, Mrs. Dorothy, it's almost over. I shook my head slowly, whispering back, No, Michael, justice is just beginning. After the recess, the courtroom felt heavier, like someone had locked the air itself inside. Judge Jenkins returned to the bench and struck her gavel 3 times, the sound echoing through the chamber. Court is now back in session. Zoe was escorted back to her seat. Her eyes were swollen, mascara streaked down her face, and her hair hung limp around her shoulders. Gone was the sharp, confident woman she had once been. What sat before us now was only a shadow. Trembling in a black dress damp with tears, the judge glanced around the room. Before sentencing, does the defendant wish to make a final statement? Zoe stood, her hands clasped tightly, voice trembling but clear. I know everyone thinks I'm greedy, but I just wanted my daughter to have a home. When Ethan died, I lost everything. I didn't know how to live anymore. I was scared of poverty, of being alone. And when I saw Mom holding the keys, the papers, I felt like I'd been pushed out of my own life. She paused, drawing a shaky breath. I lied. I deceived. I signed those papers. I thought if I was clever enough, no one would ever know. But the moment I believed I was strongest, I lost my humanity. Her voice cracked. I'm sorry, Mom. I know it's too late, but I truly am sorry. I looked at her, and in my heart, there was no anger left, only a deep, aching sadness. My voice came out soft, almost a whisper. Zoe, you didn't lose your home. You lost yourself. Judge Jenkins gave a single nod and gestured to the clerk. The charges were read aloud. Forgery of property transfer documents, exploitation of an elderly individual, obstruction of justice, and dissemination of false information. Then came the verdict. The gavel struck once sharp, final. After reviewing all evidence and testimony, the court rules. All assets under the name Zoe Carter are to be returned to Mrs. Dorothy-May Carter. The defendant, Zoe Carter, is sentenced to 2 years probation and 200 hours of community service for document falsification and defamation. Temporary guardianship of minor Amelia Carter will be granted to Mrs. Dorothy-May Carter during the execution of the sentence. The gavel fell again thud, sealing the end of a long, bitter chapter. Zoe stood frozen, hands limp at her sides, tears streaming freely. Reporters scribbled, camera flashes burst. Beside me, Michael exhaled and smiled faintly, the quiet smile of a man who knows that at last, justice has prevailed. I bowed my head, whispering to the two souls who had carried me through every storm. Arthur. Ethan. Justice has come home. As the officers led Zoe away, she turned back. Her eyes were full of something I hadn't seen in her for a long time, remorse. "Mom?" she whispered, her voice dissolving into tears. I nodded, replying softly, "You can still start over. Just don't let Amelia learn to lie the way you once did." She broke down again, sobbing, then turned away. The courtroom door closed behind her with a dry, final thud, the sound of a door shutting between two women who had once called each other mother and daughter. When I stepped outside, the afternoon sun poured down over the courthouse steps, golden and warm. I lifted my face toward the light, and for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of it. Michael asked quietly, "How do you feel?" I smiled faintly, voice steady. "Light, but it hurts too. Justice always comes with a price, Michael." He nodded. "And you paid it with strength." I looked toward the sky, now blue again after the storm, and whispered to myself, "No, I paid it with love. And with loss." After the verdict, I stepped through the heavy wooden doors of the courthouse. The air outside felt warmer, clearer, like the town itself had been holding its breath and was finally letting it go. People stopped and turned to look. Some who had once condemned me now nodded politely. A few came closer, offering handshakes and soft apologies. "We're sorry. We believed the wrong person." I simply smiled. Forgiveness had never been the hard part. What was hard was learning how not to ache when old memories returned. Michael walked beside me, a stack of documents in hand. "The court has officially reinstated you as the sole legal owner. I'll finalize the paperwork this week." "Thank you, Michael," I said quietly. "Without you, I don't think I would have made it this far." "No, Mrs. Dorothy. You're the reason I still believe there's room for kindness in the law." We stopped at the top of the courthouse steps. From across the street, I saw a small figure running toward me, tiny legs in a blue dress, soft curls bouncing with every step. "Grandma!" I knelt down, arms wide open. Amelia threw herself into my embrace, her small face pressed against my chest. My heart fluttered steady, alive like something long dormant was learning to beat again. "Mom said she's going away for a while," she murmured. "Yes, sweetheart. Your mom needs some time to rest. She cried a lot. She said she did bad things." I stroked her hair gently, my voice low. "Everyone makes mistakes, my love, but only those who face them can truly be good." "Grandma, are you angry with Mom?" "No," I said with a faint smile. "Anger makes the heart heavy, and mine's tired enough." Amelia looked up, her round eyes clear as morning water. "Then, can I draw our house again? But this time, I'll put 3 people in it, you, me, and Mom." A laugh slipped out of me before I could stop it, tears spilling freely. "Yes, sweetheart, draw it just like that." Nearby, Michael turned away, pretending to take a phone call to hide the wet shimmer in his eyes. That afternoon, we returned home. The house, once shrouded in cold silence, glowed in the sunlight. I moved slowly through each corner. Arthur's armchair, Ethan's desk, the wedding photo yellowed with time. Everything was still there. Yet something had changed. The house finally felt clean, free of lies. Amelia sat on the carpet, coloring. With a red crayon, she drew the roof, the trees, and 3 stick figures holding hands. "Grandma, done!" she squealed. I looked at the picture, whispering softly, "This is what healing looks like." Outside, the wind rustled through the trees. A sparrow landed on the railing and chirped a clear, bright sound. I closed my eyes and felt my heart finally quiet after so many storms. Arthur, Ethan, we have our home again. In the distance, the sun dipped behind the hill, painting the roof in gold. I stood there for a long time, holding Amelia's drawing close, and I knew justice had done its part. The rest was forgiveness. 3 months after the trial, the name Zoe Carter vanished from the headlines. She was no longer the grieving widow the media once pitied, nor the deceiver that the public had despised. She became nothing more than a shadow drifting through the city, unseen, unremembered. Her apartment sat in an industrial neighborhood on the edge of town, one small room with peeling paint and a window that faced nothing but a junkyard and the smokestacks of an old factory. On the table, a yellowed newspaper lay open, its bold headline still visible. Zoe Carter, the woman who lost everything to her own lies. Zoe sat on a wooden chair, staring at it with a faint, bitter smile. It wasn't laughter, just the hollow curve of someone who knew she'd gone too far to ever come back. At night, the wind howled through the iron window frame, making the torn curtains sway. She curled up in an old gray sweater, hands trembling as she unlocked her phone. No service, no contacts, only a handful of photos left. Ethan holding Amelia in the park, Dorothy beside them, her smile gentle as sunlight, and herself radiant, innocent, untouched by greed, deceit, or fear. Tears came without warning. "What have I done?" Her voice cracked, swallowed by the hum of distant trucks and the faint scratching of rats inside the wall. Every day was the same. Zoe woke at 5 a.m., walked several miles to a small laundromat on the outskirts of town. She washed, dried, folded, and left without a word. No one there knew she had once owned a house, had once been loved, had once held a child who called her mom. All of it now existed only as ash and memory scattered by the wind. One evening, she caught sight of Amelia on the local news. The little girl was standing beside Dorothy at a women's charity event, smiling brightly, holding a bouquet of flowers. The caption below read, "The Carter family, a symbol of strength and justice." Zoe froze. Her eyes locked on the screen, her fingers gripping the edge of the table until her knuckles bled. A single tear fell dark and round, spreading across the wood like spilled ink. "My baby, my little girl." She whispered it to no one. She knew she had no right to see her daughter again. The court had decided. Dorothy, the woman she had once driven out of her own home, was now the one raising Amelia with love and steadiness. That night, Zoe wandered the streets. Neon lights painted her hollow face in flickers of pink and blue. A small group outside a corner store glanced her way, whispering, "Isn't that Zoe Carter? God, she looks awful. Serves her right." She fooled her own mother-in-law. Zoe lowered her head and hurried past, her ears ringing, every word a blade. Back in her room, she dropped her bag and collapsed onto the floor. I'm not a monster, she murmured, voice shaking. I just wanted to survive. The words hung in the air, then died. In the cracked mirror across the room, her reflection stared back. A gaunt woman with lifeless eyes, a stranger she no longer recognized. Behind her, the window rattled softly in the wind. The glow of the streetlight spilled inside, catching the dust that drifted through the air, tiny glimmering motes, floating like ashes. All that remained of a life that once burned so bright. That morning, Zoe arrived at the laundromat like any other day. The air was thick with the sharp scent of bleach and detergent, the hum of dryers filling the narrow space. Steam rose from the vents, clinging to the walls, heavy and stale. She folded shirts and towels one by one, her rough, cracked hands moving on instinct. Around her, people still chatted, still laughed, but no one spoke to her. She was the mute one in a world that wouldn't stop talking. By noon, the manager called her into his office. Zoe, we received a few emails. Someone said you were involved in a fraud case. Is that true? She stayed silent. I served my sentence and I'm sorry, he interrupted softly. But the company has to protect its image. His tone was polite, almost kind, but his eyes never met hers, and Zoe understood. There was no need for shouting, no accusations. Just one sentence: protect our image, and she was erased again. That afternoon, she left the laundromat carrying a plastic bag with a few clothes and her final paycheck. Rain poured from the gray sky. Cold drops drenched her hair and clothes, but she didn't run. She just walked slowly, blankly, as if her body had forgotten what it meant to feel wet. That evening, she sat in her damp, dim little apartment. The single yellow bulb flickered overhead. She turned on the television not to watch, but to fill the silence with voices that weren't her own. And then she froze. On the screen stood Dorothy-May Carter, graceful in a white dress, accepting an award at the Woman of the Year ceremony. Beside her was Amelia, her hair tied up high, smiling like sunlight itself. The host spoke brightly. Mrs. Dorothy overcame personal tragedy to help countless elderly women who were victims of fraud. She founded Home for Hope, a non-profit organization that offers support to those who've lost everything. Thunderous applause filled the hall. Dorothy took the microphone, her voice steady, deep, and warm. I once thought justice came only from a courtroom, but it truly begins the moment we let go of hatred. I forgave the one who hurt me because, without forgiveness, I would forever remain a victim. The camera panned to the audience. Amelia waved and smiled at her grandmother. Dorothy smiled back. The hall erupted in applause again. Zoe sat motionless. Tears spilled freely, unrestrained. Dorothy's words pierced her not with anger, but with kindness. And somehow, that kindness hurt more than any punishment ever could. Forgive the one who hurt you, she whispered. But who will forgive me? She turned off the television. Darkness swallowed the room. Outside, rain beat softly against the window, merging with her quiet sobs. She pressed a trembling hand to her chest, feeling her heart still beating slowly, painfully, stubbornly alive. The next day, walking through town, she stopped near a park across from an elementary school. Children's laughter spilled through the fence, and then a voice she knew by heart. Grandma, look, I got an A! Zoe hid behind a tree, peeking through the leaves. Amelia ran toward Dorothy, waving a paper proudly. The two embraced, their laughter bright in the afternoon sun. Zoe stood there, her hands trembling, tears falling again, not from jealousy, not from guilt, but from longing. She's growing up, she whispered. Just like Ethan did. A soft breeze stirred the golden leaves, sending a few drifting to her feet. Zoe picked one up, held it gently in her palm, and said softly, "One day, maybe you'll forgive me too, Amelia." Then she turned and walked away, a small, quiet figure swallowed by the city, a name long forgotten, leaving only the whisper of her footsteps behind. Winter came earlier that year. The wind lashed against the cracked window panes of the small apartment, making the torn curtains billow like ghosts. Zoe sat at a wobbly wooden table, her gray sweater frayed at the collar, hands trembling as she wrote on a wrinkled sheet of paper. Before her lay an old envelope, blotched with ink, the words uneven. To Dorothy-May Carter. She paused, looking out of the window. Snow was falling white, endless as if trying to cover the stains of a life gone wrong. A faint smile touched her lips, but her eyes were already wet. "Mom, I don't know if this letter will ever reach you. Maybe you've forgotten me, and you have every right to. But I have to say this maybe for the first and last time. I'm truly sorry. I once thought happiness was having everything in my hands. But now, with nothing left but 2 empty palms, I finally understand happiness is when someone forgives you." A tear fell, smudging the ink. She didn't wipe it away. She let it soak in part of the truth itself. "I lost Amelia. I deserve that. I lost the house, the name, even myself. But what I fear most is losing the memory of you, the woman who opened her arms to me when I was just a clumsy, frightened young girl. I remember my first day in your home. You made vegetable soup and told me, 'Here, you don't have to be a daughter-in-law or anyone else, just family.' I forgot that, Mom. I let greed kill the love that once made me belong." Zoe stopped, exhaled shakily, and wrote the final lines. "If you read this, please tell Amelia that her mother isn't bad, just lost. And if I can do one last good thing, I want to donate what little money I have left to Home for Hope. Because maybe someone out there can find the home I destroyed and lost." She signed her name, folded the letter carefully, and slipped it into the envelope. No stamp, no address, only the words, "To the woman who taught me what love means." The next morning, Zoe walked to the post office. She placed the envelope on the counter and whispered, "Please, just send it." The clerk looked at her half puzzled, half sympathetic. "There's no address?" "Send it anywhere," Zoe said softly. "Maybe the wind will know the way." She left the post office and stepped into the snow-covered square. Snowflakes drifted gently down, melting against her hair and shoulders. One landed on her lips salty. She couldn't tell if it was snow or tears. That night, Dorothy found an unmarked envelope in her mailbox. Inside, just a letter, damp with the scent of paper and faint traces of tears. She sat quietly, reading every word. Then she folded it and placed it between 2 framed photos, Arthur and Ethan. "Arthur," she whispered. "The girl. She's finally found her way back." Turning to Amelia, who was coloring by the table, Dorothy said softly, "Sweetheart, your mother wrote me a letter. Someday, I'll tell you what it said." "She wrote to us?" Amelia beamed. "Yes, my dear." Dorothy smiled. "Sometimes saying sorry is the bravest thing a person can do." Amelia nodded, her little face glowing. Outside, snow kept falling soft, quiet, and kind, like forgiveness itself. Zoe no longer kept track of the days. Her life moved in a rhythm without meaning. Wake up, work at the bakery, come home, eat instant noodles, and stare at the fractured reflection of herself in the cracked mirror. No one called her name anymore. No one asked, "Are you okay?" Sometimes she spoke aloud just to hear her own voice again. That winter was merciless. The wind howled through the gaps in the window frame, carrying the distant echo of midnight trains. Zoe lay on her old bed, wrapped in a thin blanket, but sleep refused to come. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Amelia, her little girl, standing in a field of sunlight, looking at her with hurt and confusion. "Why did you leave me, Mom?" She jolted upright in the dark, cold sweat soaking her back. Gasping for breath, she clutched her chest, whispering, "It's just a dream. Just a dream." But the dream returned, night after night. Only this time, Amelia wasn't alone. Beside her stood Dorothy, wearing her gray dress, face calm and unreadable, neither anger nor forgiveness, just an unshakable stillness. Her eyes were deep and clear, like a mirror reflecting every sin. "Zoe," she said softly, "you chose this path. Tell me, is it cold there?" Zoe screamed and woke. The room was silent. Her heart pounded wildly. There was no one else, only her own shadow trembling against the wall. She let out a hoarse laugh, her voice breaking. "Yes, Mom. It's cold. It's so damn cold." She opened the window. The wind rushed in, slicing her skin with frost. Above, the moon hung pale and distant, casting a ghostly light over the rooftops, white, silent, like ashes scattered across the world. "Do you still hate me, Dorothy?" she whispered. "Or worse, did you stop thinking about me already?" No answer. Only the wind, sighing through the night like someone grieving from far away. The next morning, Zoe arrived late to the bakery. The owner frowned. "Did you stay up all night again? You look terrible." "I just had dreams," she muttered, her hand trembling as she cut a loaf of bread. People around her began to avoid her gaze. They didn't believe the rumors, but they didn't dare get close either. Zoe had become that kind of woman everyone saw, but no one truly looked at. That night, back in her room, she opened a drawer and took out the worn envelope, her copy of the letter she'd sent to Dorothy. She reread every line, her fingers tracing the words. "I'm truly sorry." Each time she read it, her chest tightened, as if the apology itself could never be enough to cleanse what she'd done. She added a final note at the bottom. "If there's a next life, I won't ask to be your daughter-in-law. I'll only ask to be someone who knows how to be grateful." Folding the paper carefully, she placed it on a small altar she'd built from 2 bricks. On it sat a faded photo of Ethan, printed from the internet, and a flickering candle. Zoe knelt, whispering a prayer not for herself, but for Dorothy and Amelia, that their lives might stay peaceful and full of light. The candlelight wavered across her face, thin, weary, yet softened somehow. And for the first time in many months, her tears didn't burn. They fell gently, one by one, and with each drop, a little bit of darkness left her heart. That night, the snow kept falling. Zoe lay on her bed, breath shallow, one arm slipping from beneath the blanket. The candle on the table flickered, trembled, and went out. Darkness filled the room, and in that darkness, she drifted into sleep deep, unbroken, and unlike any other before. She found herself standing on a cobblestone path she knew by heart. There was no snow, only sunlight, soft and golden like a memory. Before her stood the old house. The wooden door was slightly open. From inside came the faint, familiar scent of apple pie. She stepped forward. Each footfall felt like walking through time. The curtains with the tiny flowers Dorothy loved still hung by the window. The same old sofa. The wedding photo of Ethan still smiling down from the wall. Then laughter, a child's laughter, bright and ringing. "Mom!" Grandma said lunch is ready. Zoe turned. Amelia came running, wrapping her little arms around her legs. Sunlight spilled over the child's face, warm and alive. Amelia, she whispered, her voice breaking like glass. From the kitchen came Dorothy, holding a wooden spoon, smiling as she always used to. No courtroom, no judgment, just the gentle calm of a mother's love. You're home, Zoe, Dorothy said softly. The pie just came out of the oven. Zoe dropped to her knees at the doorway, tears streaming down her face. Mom, I'm sorry. I destroyed everything. I hurt you. I hurt Amelia. I don't deserve to be here. Dorothy placed a warm, steady hand on her shoulder. It felt real, so real, Zoe thought she might still be alive inside this dream. You are here, Zoe, Dorothy said, and in this house, everyone is forgiven. Amelia giggled and ran up, holding out a slice of pie. Mom, eat it. It's your favorite, remember? Zoe took it, her hands trembling. She bit into it, the taste sweet and warm, burning in her throat with the ache of nostalgia. It was exactly the same as before, the flavor of the last evening before everything fell apart. I remember now, she whispered, tears running freely. It was never about the house or the money. It was about being loved. Dorothy smiled. And love never left you, Zoe. You just closed your eyes for too long to see it. The words touched something deep inside her. Zoe looked up. Light was spreading through the house, bright, golden, endless. Dorothy reached out, took her hand, and whispered, Wake up, my child. Zoe gasped. Morning sunlight streamed through the cracked window. The tiny apartment was the same gray walls, torn curtains, and yet it felt lighter, warmer. She sat up. Tears still glistened on her cheeks, but her chest no longer hurt. A smile, soft, genuine, almost shy, curved her lips, the first in years. On the table, the candle had burned itself down to wax. Beside it lay something new, a small piece of paper that must have slipped out of the old Bible. On it, in faded ink, were 4 simple words. You are forgiven. Zoe held the paper tightly, whispering through her tears. Thank you, Mom. She stood and opened the window. Outside, the snow had stopped. A pale sunlight broke through the clouds, washing her face in gold. She inhaled slowly, deeply, and for the first time in a long, long while, it didn't hurt to breathe. Somewhere deep inside, she knew Dorothy had forgiven her, even if they would never meet again. And perhaps that was the only mercy life still had left for her. After the night she dreamed of Dorothy, Zoe woke with a strange feeling, as if something inside her chest had finally been loosened. It didn't mean the guilt was gone. It meant she had accepted it as a part of herself. She stepped out of her little apartment and breathed deeply. The morning air was crisp. Sunlight filtered through the trees, glinting against her roughened hands. For the first time in years, Zoe felt she wanted to live not to escape, but to begin again. At the small church-run shelter nearby, she asked if they needed help. When the supervisor, an older woman with kind eyes, saw her name, she hesitated, then simply said, I've heard of you, but if you truly want to help, we don't ask about the past. Zoe bowed her head, voice trembling. I don't need to be trusted. I just want to be useful. And so she began with the smallest of tasks, clearing tables, washing dishes, handing out food to the homeless. No one there knew she'd once been a headline, or that she'd once lived in a house with chandeliers and marble floors. Here, she was just a quiet woman with a tired smile, who always gave the best slice of bread to whoever came last. One afternoon, a young woman arrived, her face bruised, her hands shaking as she clutched a child. Zoe handed her a bowl of soup and placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You'll be fine, dear. Don't let pain turn you into someone you're not." The girl began to cry, and in that moment, Zoe realized something profound. She was no longer the woman to be pitied or condemned. She was giving back to the world the very kindness she had once stolen from it. In the evenings, she would sit at a wooden desk in the small church library. Under the soft glow of a single lamp, she wrote not to Dorothy, not to Amelia, but to strangers she would never meet. To the woman who lost herself because of fear, to the one who thinks money can buy forgiveness, to the mother who forgot how to love herself. She kept the letters in a worn box, labeling it in her careful handwriting, "For those who need to start over." One day, the parish priest found the box and asked permission to read some of the letters during a meeting for women who had survived abuse. Zoe froze for a long time. Then she nodded. That evening, when the priest read aloud one of her letters, "I once did the worst thing a person could do, but it taught me how to love others more gently." The room fell completely silent. Then a middle-aged woman stood up, walked over, and embraced Zoe, sobbing. "Thank you. I thought no one could understand." Zoe didn't speak. She simply smiled softly, kindly. At peace. The woman's tears soaked her shoulder, but for once, they didn't hurt. That night, Zoe lit a candle before her little altar and whispered, "Mom, I think I understand now. Forgiveness isn't something people give you. It's something you learn to give yourself." The candlelight danced across her face, no longer harsh or haunted, just calm, open, alive. Outside, the wind brushed against the window, carrying with it the slow chime of church bells. Zoe closed her eyes, whispered a final prayer. "For the first time, I'm not running anymore." 1 year after the trial, the little town had settled back into its calm rhythm. The story of the Carter mother-in-law and daughter-in-law dispute was now nothing more than a moral anecdote told at women's gatherings, a cautionary tale wrapped in empathy. But for Dorothy-May, the memories remained not as wounds anymore, but as reminders that had learned how to stop hurting. Each morning, she walked with Amelia to the park, carrying a small bag of pastries for the children from the poorer side of town. Every time she saw them laugh, something in her chest lifted a quiet warmth, as if someone unseen were smiling with her. Maybe it was Arthur, maybe Ethan, or maybe Zoe. On the family altar, beside the photos of her husband and son, Dorothy still kept the weathered letter, the one with no address, the one the wind had brought her last winter. The paper had yellowed, the ink had faded, yet she could never bring herself to tuck it away. Sometimes she read it aloud, voice soft, as if speaking to her own soul. Happiness isn't having everything. It's keeping kindness even when someone has hurt you. One afternoon in late spring, while she and Amelia were planting roses in the garden, the little girl asked, "Grandma, will Mom ever come back?" Dorothy paused, then smiled, her hands brushing soil over the rose roots. "One day, sweetheart, when she's ready." Amelia nodded and went back to planting. She didn't ask again. Children have their own kind of faith, simple, quiet, but steadier than any logic adults ever manage. In another city, miles away, Zoe was working at an elder care center. She was no longer Zoe Carter, the name once splashed across headlines. She went by her maiden name again, Zoe Henderson. She never spoke of her past. She simply lived each day as it came. Every morning, she helped the elderly sit up, fed them spoonful by spoonful, wiped their faces, and told clumsy little jokes that made them laugh. In their wrinkled faces, She often saw pieces of Dorothy's strength, grace, and a love that never had to prove itself. Each time she tucked a blanket around an old woman's shoulders, she'd whisper softly, "Be warm, okay?" as if speaking to the mother she once betrayed. On her desk stood a small photo frame, Amelia, smiling in a field of flowers. The photo had come from Dorothy a few months earlier, along with a handwritten note. "Thank you for your letter. Amelia read it, and she wanted to send you this smile." "Mom!" Zoe had cried when she received it, not tears of bitterness, but of release, the kind that cleans rather than sting. A few months later, the center hosted a small program called Listen to Their Stories. Zoe was asked to speak to share her experience with women who had lost their way, made mistakes, and feared they'd never be forgiven. Standing under the warm light of a modest stage, she didn't read from a paper or deliver a rehearsed speech. She simply spoke slow, steady, honest. "I used to think mistakes were the end, but they're not. They're doors that open to show us how small we are before someone's kindness. Someone once taught me this. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It just gives us the peace we need to walk past it. So if any of you are carrying regret tonight, don't run from it. Face it. Because sometimes the tears we shed today are the seeds of a better tomorrow." When she finished, the room was silent for a long heartbeat. Then came applause, slow, growing, until it filled the hall. Among the audience sat an elderly woman with silver-haired Dorothy. She said nothing, just nodded, eyes bright with quiet pride. Zoe froze for a moment, her breath catching. Tears blurred her vision. Dorothy smiled faintly, raised a hand, a soft, wordless greeting. It was enough, a sign that everything between them had truly, finally come to rest. That evening, they met behind the center, after nearly 2 years apart. No accusations, no apologies left to say. Just 2 women, one older, one younger, sitting side by side on a garden bench, watching the sunset spill over the roses. "Mom," Zoe whispered, voice trembling. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again." Dorothy smiled gently. "God always leaves a door open, if we truly want to make things right." They sat in silence for a while. A sparrow fluttered by. A soft breeze rustled the rose bushes beside them. "Amelia, is she doing well?" "She's happy. She misses you, but there's no anger in her heart. She has Ethan's spirit and yours." Zoe bit her lip, tears slipping down. "Thank you, Mom, for not giving up on me, even when I gave up on you." Dorothy reached out, laying a tender hand over hers. "You've learned something many never do, Zoe. Family isn't blood, it's the people who choose to stay, even after the pain." Zoe broke down, resting her head on Dorothy's shoulder. Dorothy said nothing, only stroked her back like one soothes a child. They sat there under the fading light, surrounded by roses, the same flowers they had once planted together. Before everything had fallen apart. That night, as Dorothy and Amelia left, Zoe stood by the gate, watching them go. And she smiled, not the smile of someone who's been forgiven, but of someone who has finally learned how to love life again. The evening wind lifted a few rose petals, spinning them up into the golden light before they scattered into the air, carrying a whisper only she could hear. Forgiveness is freedom,